Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new free and open source image generator, and this is blazing fast, and you can even run it with as low as 2 gigabytes of VRAM or even just with a CPU. It's called FLUX2 Klein, and in this video, I'm going to test this head-to-head with the top image models out there so you can see how good this is. Plus, of course, I'm also going to show you step-by-step how to install it so you can use it for free and unlimited times offline on your computer. Let's jump right in. So the team behind Flux kind of got crushed by Z-Image Turbo in the last round, but today they just released FLUX2 Klein, which is a serious competitor. You can generate images in just seconds, even with just a consumer GPU. So here are some examples for your reference. It's really good at generating these realistic photos. Here's another example, and it seems to handle, faces and skin and hands and fingers pretty well. Here's another pretty realistic amateur photo. You can see we no longer get those plastic fake Flux vibes from previous generations of Flux models. This looks super realistic. It even has some motion blur and some imperfections with this photo. It's really hard to tell that this was AI generated. Here's another example for your reference. The hands and fingers all look correct, and this looks very realistic. Not only that, but it can also handle anime, as you can see here and here. Now, the awesome thing about FLUX2 Klein is not only is it an image generator, but it can also edit images, just like Nano Banana. So for example, we can turn this guy into balloons like this. Or here's another example where we can edit this zebra to be like this or like this. Now, they've released two different variants of this. There's a 9 billion parameter model, which is, of course, larger and better quality, but it's going to take longer to run. Now, this is under the Flux non-commercial license, so it's quite restrictive, but they've also released a 4 billion parameter variant, which is a lot faster, and this is under the Apache 2 license, which has very minimal restrictions. You can even use this for commercial purposes. And the really awesome thing about it is the distilled 4 billion parameter models, here it says only requires 8.4 gigabytes of VRAM to run, which is actually not true. There are already some quantized versions which can even run with as low as 2 gigabytes of VRAM. Also note that for each variant, they released a distilled version, but also a base model. Now, this base model is super important because this is like an undistilled foundation model, which is a lot more flexible, and you can fine-tune this and create LoRa's from it. Now, just from my initial testing, I find that the quality of the 9B model is way better than the 4B model. So if you do have enough RAM, then definitely try to use the 9B version rather than the 4B version. Now, those are just some of their official demos, which might be cherry-picked. So here are some of my tests as well. First of all, I'm going to show you some text-to-image examples. And here I'm using the 9B distilled version, and I'm comparing this with the top open source models out there, Qwen Image 2512 and Z-Image Turbo. The first prompt is testing how good it is at understanding different expressions and hand gestures. So we have a woman taking a selfie in a cafe. She's doing a cute expression with pursed lips, winking, one hand doing a peace sign. It's going to be an irregular angle, amateur, low-quality photo. And honestly, the result from FLUX2 9B is really good. I would say here it's a tie between Flux and Z-Image Turbo. For Qwen, this looks kind of too professional and it's not at an irregular angle. Next prompt, here is a realistic amateur photo of Snow White and Elsa wearing bikinis. Their tongues sticking out, hugging each other in a subway train. The train is crowded with people sitting and standing. Now for Flux Klein, it wasn't able to put Snow White in a bikini for some reason. For Qwen Image, this looks way too plasticky and fake, plus they're not in bikinis. And for Z-Image Turbo, this seems like the best out of the 3 generations in my opinion. I would say the point here goes to Z-Image. For FLUX2, it didn't put Snow White in a bikini, so unfortunately that wasn't a pass. Next, here's a prompt testing how good it is at rendering long pieces of text. So here's the prompt. It's a hand holding a pen, writing in a diary, and the text should say this is quite a long piece of text, much longer than what typical AI image models could generate accurately. This is a test to see if all the text would show up correctly here. Also, remember to subscribe to my channel. Now for FLUX2 Klein, you can see a ton of misspellings everywhere, even though this is the 9B model, so it's not really good at handling a lot of text. For Qwen Image 2512, it was able to handle this beautifully. There's no misspellings or anything like that. And then for Z-Image Turbo, there are a ton of misspellings, which is expected. Z-Image isn't particularly good with text. So I would say the point here goes to Qwen Image. Next, here's a prompt that none of the open source image models could get correct so far, and even some of the top closed models aren't able to handle this. So the prompt is 11:15 on the clock and a wine glass filled to the top. You can see that none of them were able to get neither of these elements correct. None of them could generate 11:15, and none of them could generate a wine glass filled to the top. So it's a fail for all three. Alright, next up, here's another really tricky prompt. We have a sleek modern bathroom. A man is looking into the mirror, but his reflection is a smeary data-moshed mess of colors and dragging pixels. And all three of these got it all right, but I would say in terms of actually having a data-moshed mess of colors and dragging pixels only applied to his reflection while the rest of the bathroom remains clear and sharp, I would say the point goes to Qwen and Z image. So for FLUX2, it's not really just smudging his reflection. But let me know in the comments what you think. Next, I also wanted to see how good it is at different artistic styles. So here we have a Monet-style impressionist painting of a busy train station. Now for your information, here's what a Monet impressionist painting looks like. So it's basically a bunch of quite abstract brushstrokes and nothing is really clearly defined. You kind of have to take a few steps back and look at it to actually quote unquote see the image. Anyways, here's what I got for these three models. Honestly, none of them are really good at generating this impressionist style, but for FLUX2, it does generate these rough brushstrokes, so I'll give it some points for that. Same with Z Image Turbo. It's hard to pick a winner here, they're not great, but I would say it's a tie between FLUX2 and Z Image Turbo. Here's another fun example. So the prompt is a flat illustration of a deer in a forest, but everything is composed of dots of varying sizes on a white background. And for this example, FLUX2 was the only one that was able to get it correct. Everything is indeed composed of dots. Whereas for Qwen image, you can see that the deer's face and the antlers aren't really composed of dots, so that's a fail. And then for Z Image Turbo, it came close, but again, the eyes and the face of the deer aren't really composed of dots, so just a minor error there. Here, I would say the winner is FLUX2 Klein. Now, I gotta say, FLUX2 Klein is quite bad at anatomy, so here the prompt is a woman wearing a white bikini doing a king pigeon yoga pose, which for your information looks like this. Explosions in the background. Now both Qwen and Z Image came close to generating a king pigeon pose, but FLUX2 Klein wasn't even close. This is not a king pigeon pose, and apparently she has 4 arms, which is slightly disturbing. Next, here's a test on UI design. So the prompt is down here. It's pretty long, so I'm not going to read it all. You can pause the video if you want, but basically all 3 of them were able to design this UI given all the text and elements that I specified. So I guess it's a pass for all 3, but I would have to say the designs from Qwen Image and Z Image Turbo look a bit better, whereas for FLUX2 it looks kind of flat. Next, here's a test on its prompt understanding. So we have a beach in Bali at dusk with a woman in a blue and yellow tie-dye sarong and a pink flower crown, which all 3 models got correct, and she's doing yoga. For FLUX2 Klein, it doesn't look like she's doing yoga, so I gotta take some points off for that. We have a gray monkey stealing a brown coconut from her green beach bag, and all 3 models were able to generate this pretty well. We have a red surfboard with a white hibiscus leaning against a green palm tree. All 3 models were able to get that. And then we have a fisherman's boat in the background, plus a red Bali sunset sign glowing at a bar. And all 3 models were able to generate those elements as well. However, for FLUX2, it misspelled sunset, so it's not really that good with text, whereas for Qwen Image, it was able to get the spelling correct. For Z Image, it also misspelled sunset. So I would say the image model that actually followed the prompt 100% would be Qwen Image. Next, we have a minimalist Chinese watercolor painting of a tiger in a forest. Now, if you're not familiar with these Chinese watercolor paintings, it's kind of like using really abstract brushstrokes, and they don't use a lot of outlines defining anything. So I would say this example from Z Image is beautiful. You can see the trees and the leaves aren't really defined. These are just like really rough brushstrokes. Same with the tiger here, like nothing is really defined. Whereas for FLUX2, you can see it has too many of these outlines, which isn't really common in Chinese watercolor paintings. Same with Qwen Image, this tiger looks way too defined for a Chinese watercolor painting. So I would say in this example, the winner goes to Z image. All right, next, I also tested FLUX2 Klein 9B distilled on some image editing examples. Notice that here I'm testing this on Qwen Image Edit 2511, which is currently the top open source image editor out there. Notice that these two models, Qwen Image and Z Image Turbo, don't have image editing abilities, so it's quite confusing. You can't edit images with these. The awesome thing about FLUX2 Klein is it has both image generation and editing abilities built into just one model. So here I uploaded this photo of a really complex dress and then this woman, and for the prompt, I put make the woman in the city wear this dress. And both models were able to generate the dress very accurately, even though this is a very complex design. However, I would have to give my preference to FLUX2 Klein. You can see the colors are actually the same as the original photo. Whereas for Qwen Image Edit, it seems to add a slight blue tinge, so you can see the pink of her hair isn't the same shade of pink as the original photo. So in terms of actually preserving the original colors and consistency, FLUX2 seems to do a bit better. Here's another example where here's the input image. It's quite a complex scene of these three folks having a barbecue, and for the prompt, I put view the scene from above. So here's what I got from FLUX2 Klein, and here is Qwen Image Edit. You can see FLUX2 looks a lot more realistic and it preserves the colors from the original photo a lot better. Whereas for Qwen Image Edit, it seems to increase the saturation too much, and the colors don't really match the original photo, which has kind of a yellow vintage tone to it. And if you look at the details of the food and the people, FLUX2 is a lot more consistent. For example, she should have sunglasses over here, which FLUX2 was able to generate, but Qwen Image could not generate this. And then it looks like she's holding a cup of ice with a straw, which FLUX2 was kind of able to get correct. Whereas for Qwen Image, this looks more like just a glass of water. Notice the details of the patties here. Flux was able to get this correct, whereas for Qwen Image, the patties look kind of different. So again, I would have to give the point to FLUX2. It's really good at preserving the consistency of an original photo. All right, final example, I inputted this photo and then this photo, and then for the prompt, I put make the girl in the forest do this yoga pose in this yoga studio. Here's what I got from FLUX2, and like I said, it's pretty bad at anatomy, especially for people from far away. So while it was able to kind of get her outfit correct, you can see that she has an extra arm here, plus her fingers are all messed up. Whereas for Qwen Image Edit, it absolutely nailed this. It was able to get the appearance and the outfit of this character completely correct while doing this yoga pose in this studio. So here, clearly the point goes to Qwen Image Edit. So that sums up some of my quick tests comparing FLUX2 Klein against the top open source models out there. It's kind of a close call. I wouldn't say FLUX2 is like significantly better. Sometimes it does better, sometimes it does worse. But the advantage of this is it's a blazing fast model, as I'll show you in a second. Plus, you can even fit this with just 2 GB of VRAM or even lower. And the really nice thing about this is it's an image generator and editor built into just one model. Whereas if you use, for example, Qwen, if you want to generate images, you need to use Qwen Image. And then if you want to edit existing images, you have to download an additional model, Qwen Image Edit. So it just takes up way more space on your hard drive. Anyways, those are just some of my quick tests. The awesome thing is they've released all the models already, so next let's go over how you can actually install this and run it locally on your computer. On their official Hugging Face repo, here it gives you all the instructions on how you can run this with raw code, but it's not as intuitive as if you ran this on a graphical interface. So what I'm going to show you instead is how you can run this in Comfy UI. This is like the most popular platform for running open source image and video generators offline. In fact, if you haven't heard of Comfy UI, definitely see this video first for a full installation tutorial. Anyways, back to this video, I'm going to assume you already have Comfy UI installed. Speaking of AI tools, you've got to check out Mago, the sponsor of this video. Mago is a powerful video-to-video tool to transform your videos with control for VFX 3D or even restyling videos with your own styles. It's an end-to-end production workflow which allows you to edit video efficiently. You can start by transforming your image with Nano Banana Pro inside the app. Then select your model based on what you want to achieve. For example, you can replace a character or the entire scene. It's not just about using a prompt. You actually have total control of the video with advanced settings and control nets that you can visualize and compare. And the timeline on the right makes it extremely easy to iterate. Just select your render and iterate to transform your video step by step. This means you can take advantage of all the models and their different strengths at different steps of your project. For example, here I made a first transformation with Qwen to replace the character, then changed the background, and then added a dragon, and finally used the first frame model to relight my scene. If you want to work precisely with real control, Mago is the ideal tool to use. Try Mago today using the link in the description below. You can use my code AI Search to get 50% off your first month. Now, the first thing we should do is update Comfy UI to the latest version. Note that I'm using the Windows portable version, which is recommended because it keeps everything in a standalone folder and it doesn't conflict with other existing Python stuff that you might have on your computer. Anyways, I'm going to click on this update folder, and you can either click on this file to update to the absolute latest version, or to be safer, you can also click on this update Comfy UI stable, which only updates to the latest stable version. Anyways, for me, I'm just going to click on this one and click run. So it's going to proceed to update to the latest version. All right, after that's done, we can press any key to continue, which will exit the window. And then let me go back to my root Comfy UI folder and start up Comfy UI. Now, at the time of this recording, I'm still really early to this. So if I click on templates and I search for Klein, it doesn't look like they've released any workflow for FLUX2 Klein. So what I'm going to do instead is in the description below, I'm going to link to this workflow, and all you need to do is right click and then click Save As. And this would prompt you to save a JSON file. Now you can save this wherever you want. I'm just going to save it in my root Comfy UI folder. So let's click save, and then afterwards I can just drag and drop this JSON file onto my interface, and voila, it should automatically have this workflow pre-built for me. Note that here there are two different workflows. This is for the full undistilled model. Now here's the difference. For this full model, this has the maximum flexibility, so this is the one to use if you want to fine-tune it or train your own LoRa's. This tends to have higher output diversity than a distilled model. However, this runs way slower than the distilled model, and it requires slightly more VRAM. So for example, if I click on this button here to expand the subgraph, you can see that here it requires 20 steps. So that's the full undistilled workflow. If instead you want to use the distilled model, this is slightly faster at the sacrifice of some quality. So I'm going to hold Control and drag across these two nodes and then press Control B to bypass them, and then again hold Control and drag across these and then press Control B to unbypass them. So here you can see this uses the 4B distilled model, and then if I click on this subgraph to expand the workflow, you can see that here it only uses 4 steps. So it's like 5 times faster than the non-distilled version. If you're only generating images with this, you don't need to fine-tune it for anything else. You don't need to test it on some super complicated prompts. Then the distilled version is the most efficient one to use. So that's what I'm going to use here. Now, before I go over this workflow, we first need to make sure we download the models in the correct folders. So I'm going to link to this page in the description below. This is just Comfy's Hugging Face repo for FLUX2 Klein 4B. And then here in split files, this contains all the files that you need to download. So first of all, if you click on diffusion models, here you can see both the distilled model and the base non-distilled model. Note that both of these are 7.75 gigabytes, so you should be able to fit this within like 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Let me download this distilled one, and this goes in Comfy UI, in models, and then diffusion models. Alright, so that takes care of this one. And then next, we also need to download the text encoder, Qwen 3. So next, again, back in this Hugging Face repo, we can click on text encoders. And then here we are given two different Qwen 3 text encoders. One is 8 gigabytes in size, and another one is a compressed version, which is only 3.85 gigabytes in size. So if you don't have enough VRAM or RAM, then I would go with this smaller one. So for me, I'm just going to click download for this one, and this goes in Comfy UI, in models, and then text encoders. Let's click save. All right, so that covers this Qwen 3 one, and then finally, we also need to download the FLUX2 VAE. So back here, let me click into this VAE folder, and then download this VAE, which is 336 megabytes in size. So this goes in Comfy UI, in Models, and then in VAE. Let's press save. All right, after all three of these are downloaded, let's press R to refresh my model list. And then over here, I can click on each model and select the one that I downloaded from the dropdown. So for the first one, it's going to be this. For the text encoder, it's going to be this one. And then for the VAE, it's going to be this one. Those are all the models that you need to download. So let's go over this workflow. It's really simple. Here is where you enter a text prompt. So for example, let's try something like a macro photo of a honeybee collecting nectar from a flower. So your prompt would be fed through either here if you choose to use the full model, or to over here if you choose to use the distilled model. And then here, the labels are not really set, but this first value is the width, this second value is the height. And that's basically all you need to set. Now, if you expand the subgraph, there are additional things you can set. For example, the sampler. So these are like different algorithms on how it would generate the image, and then the CFG scales. So you can try tweaking this to a smaller value if you want it to be more creative, or to a higher value if you want it to follow your prompt more literally. And then here, if you're using the distilled model, you should just leave the step count to 4. And then here for batch size, this is like how many images you want to generate at once. So if you set this to 2, it's going to generate 2 images at once. Anyways, for me, I'm just going to leave all these values at the default and then go back to the parent workflow. And that's pretty much it. So let's press run. And we are done. So if I expand my terminal, you can see that this took only 15 seconds to load everything, and the image generation took like 2 seconds. And here's what we get. Here is indeed a macro photo of this honeybee collecting nectar from a flower. Very nice. And note that this is a save image node, so this should automatically be saved in your output folder in Comfy UI. So that's how you can do text to image. Now, the awesome thing about FLUX2 Klein is that you can also edit images just like Nano Banana. So again, at the time of this recording, I'm really early to this, so I don't think Comfy UI has added the image editing workflow to their templates yet. So what I'm going to do instead is link to this workflow file in the description below, and all you need to do is right click on this and then click Save As. So again, you can save this wherever you want. I'm just going to save it in my Comfy UI root folder. And this should save a workflow file called FLUX2 Klein Image Edit. And again, all you need to do is drag and drop this workflow onto your interface like this. And here's what the workflow looks like. So again, you need to make sure you have all these models downloaded. These are exactly the same models as our previous text-to-image workflow, as you can see here. So you'll need to download the Qwen 3 text encoder, plus the FLUX2 Klein 4B model, plus the FLUX2 VAE. We've already downloaded this from the previous workflows, so we don't need to download them again. So let's go over this workflow. Here again, you're actually given 2 choices. For the first option over here, this only takes in 1 input image for you to edit. Whereas for the second option, you can input 2 reference images. So actually, let's just go over the first option where we input 1 image to edit first. So I'm going to hold Control, drag across these nodes, and then press Control B to reactivate them. And then down here, again, I'm going to hold down Control and then drag across these and then press Control B to bypass them. And then just to make this more organized, let me also click on this one and then bypass this as well. All right, so it's really straightforward. Here is where we upload an image that we want to edit. So for example, let me upload this image and then let's write turn her Hanfu to red. And that's pretty much it. Now, again, here is where we need to click on the dropdown for each model and select the model that we downloaded. So I'm going to select this one. And then for this text encoder, let's select this one. And then for VAE, let's select this one. Now, let me just expand the subgraph first so you can see what this looks like. So it's pretty similar to the previous workflow. Again, here is where we can set the CFG to determine how creative or how literally it follows your prompt. Here's where you can select the sampler, which is the algorithm that's used to generate the image. Here's the step count, which I would leave to 4 if you're using the distilled model. And then here's the batch size or the number of images you want to generate at once. And that's pretty much it. So let me click on this again to go back to the parent workflow, and then let's click run. Again, I'm not even going to pause my video. I'm just going to show you how long it takes for this to load. It's really quick. I'm using 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so it's not even like the best GPU out there. And here we go. Here is our result. Note that it's really good at keeping, the character consistency. She pretty much remains the same as the original photo. And the really cool thing is it even knows to add some red reflection on the sword. That's really cool. Let me also show you my terminal for this. So this took like 15 seconds for it to load all the models into memory, and then it only took like 4 seconds to actually generate the photo. So it's like 1 second per step. Super quick. By the way, one thing I forgot to mention here is that you'll notice the dimensions of your output are not the same as your input. So actually, if you expand this subgraph again, here, there's actually an upscaler which upscales to the number of megapixels that you select. So you could scale this to 4 megapixels to make an even higher resolution image. But if you want to keep just the same resolution as your input image, simply click on this and then press Ctrl B to bypass it. And then over here, this time, let's make her Hanfu black and then press run again. Since we bypassed that node, we now should see the same dimensions as our input image. And again, because this is a save image node, you should see your result saved in the output folder of Comfy UI. All right, so that's an example of how to edit one image. Next, let me show you how to input 2 reference images. So let me hold down Control and select over these and then press Control B to bypass them. And then down here, I'm going to hold Control and drag across all these nodes and then press Control B to activate them again. So here's where I can load this image and another image. So for example, I'm going to keep this image and then I'm also going to upload this other character. And then let's write the person in image 1 and the person in image 2 are having dinner at a fancy restaurant. And then down here, again, we need to select from the models that we downloaded. So I'm going to select this one. And then for the text encoder, I'm going to select this one, the FP4 version, which is a lot smaller. And then for VAE, I'm going to select this one. Now, before I press run, let's click on this subgraph to expand it. And if you don't see anything, click on this button here to fit it to view. All right, so here you can see that, again, you have the option of upscaling this to whatever megapixels that you set. So let's just leave it at default. Here, what's going on is it's actually getting the image size from the first photo after you upscale it and setting that as the dimensions of your final image. So here, notice that I have 2 images, right? This is horizontal, this is vertical, but the final image is just going to be in this aspect ratio. If I want the output width and height to be different, well, I can expand this subgraph again, and then here I can simply delete these connections and then specify my own width and height. So for example, I can set this to be like 1280 by 720, like this. So you can do this if you want to specify an exact width and height that are different from your reference images. And then afterwards, again, it goes through this sampler component where you can set the CFG and the sampler and the step count, and then it would proceed to generate the image. So let me go back here and then press run. Now, because this is inputting 2 images, this is going to run slightly longer, but it's still really quick. And here's what we get. But let me actually drag both my reference images over here, and as you can see, it preserves the appearance and outfits of both these characters. Plus, you can see that my output image is 1280 by 720, which is what I set. And if I open my terminal, this time it took a bit longer, so 7 seconds to generate the image. So in a nutshell, that is how you can use FLUX2 Klein to edit one or multiple images. It's as simple as that. Alright, now let's say you have even lower than like 8 or 12 gigabytes of VRAM and you can't get any of these workflows to work. Well, fortunately, there are already even more quantized versions of FLUX2 Klein. This is by Unsloth, and you can see the smallest one, the most quantized one, is only like 1.8 gigabytes in size, so this can even fit within like only 2 gigabytes of VRAM. This is super lightweight. And yes, GGUFs are optimized for non-CUDA devices, so you can even potentially run this on like AMD devices or CPU, although it's going to be a bit slower. So anyways, I'll link to this page as well, and if you click on files and versions, here are all the different types of GGUFs that you can use. These are all pretty tiny, so you would choose the one that would fit within your VRAM. For example, if I have 4 gigabytes of VRAM, I could probably go with this one, 4BQ6. So let me click on download, and this goes in Comfy UI, in models, and then in UNet. Let's click save. Alright, afterwards back in Comfy UI, let me just load up the default text-to-image workflow and show you how to load the GGUF onto there. So let me drag this text-to-image workflow again onto the interface, which should look like this. And again, we are not going to use the full model, which takes a bit longer. So I'm just going to hold Control, drag across these nodes, and then press Control B to deactivate them. And then down here, I'm going to hold down Control again, and then press Control B to unbypass these nodes. Now, it's the same workflow as before, so here's where you would enter a text prompt. In fact, let me just leave the text prompt as is. So we have a hedgehog wearing a tiny party hat, surrounded by confetti, early digital camera style, slight noise, flash photography, etc., etc. And then here's where you would set the width and height, so let's just leave this as is. And then here for UNet, we can just leave this at some random value. You don't actually need to select anything because we are going to load a GGUF onto here instead. So you can just leave this as is. For the clip, we do need to select the one we just downloaded, which is this one. And then for the VAE, we also need to select this one. Now, how this works is we need to click into this subgraph to expand the workflow. And then here is where we need to replace this node with a GGUF loader instead. So what you need to do is just double click anywhere on the top and then type in UNet, and you should see this one, UNet Loader GGUF. So let's select this. And by the way, if you don't see this, then you might need to click on Manager and then search for GGUF, and you'll need to download this one, Comfy UI GGUF by City96. And if you still can't get this to work, it's also worth trying to update to the latest version. Anyways, I already have this, so here's what you should see. And then if you've just downloaded the GGUF, then you'll need to press R to refresh your model list. And then afterwards, in this dropdown, you should be able to select the GGUF that you just downloaded. So let me select this, and all you need to do is basically replace this node with this one. So here it seems like it's only being connected to this model input, so I'm just going to drag this output over to here. And that's all you need to do. So now if I press run, you can see that it's using my GGUF. And if I click back to the parent workflow, here is my output image. It's as simple as that. So that's just text to image. Next, let me show you how to also load a GGUF to an image editing workflow. So again, I'm just going to drag the image editing workflow onto the interface again, which should look like this. And this time I'm just going to do an example with one image. So I'm going to disable these nodes and enable these ones. First, let me upload an image really quickly. So let's just do this one. And then let's write make it winter, snowing. And then again, you can ignore this UNet model. For clip, you do need to select the one you downloaded. And then for VAE, you also need to select the one you downloaded. And then afterwards, we can expand this subgraph. And then over here, again, you just need to replace this load diffusion model node with a GGUF node. So I'm going to click anywhere at the top and then type in UNet, and then select UNet Loader GGUF. And then same as before, down here, we can select this GGUF that I just downloaded. And then afterwards, it looks like this is just connected to this model input. So I just need to drag the output from here and connect it to over here. and the settings are the same as before. In fact, I don't need to upscale this, so let me just click on this and bypass it, and then press run. Again, this is blazing fast, and it should be finished within like a few seconds. So if I click back into my parent workflow, you can see that now here is my generation. Very nice. So in a nutshell, that is how you can use FLUX2 Klein, even if you have like only 2 gigabytes of VRAM. And that sums up my installation tutorial and review of FLUX2 Klein. This is a serious competitor to Z-Image Turbo. Let me know in the comments what you think of this, and actually which image model do you prefer? What are some of the most impressive things you were able to generate from FLUX2 Klein? And as before, if you run into any errors during the installation, welcome to paste the error message in the comments below and I'll try to help you troubleshoot as much as possible. As always, I will be on the lookout for the top AI news and tools to share with you. So if you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Also, there's just so much happening in the world of AI every week. I can't possibly cover everything on my YouTube channel. So to really stay up to date with all that's going on in AI, be sure to subscribe to my free weekly newsletter. The link to that will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.